Welcome back to Strange Form. Today we will be looking at Kotobukiya'S 3 ARTFX 1/10 scale alien displays from the first, second, and third films. And we will be doing this from my new office studio. It being entirely too hot in the attic to film over the summer, I've moved things into a new space, so I hope you enjoy it here as you did there. Now, if you've watched my top 10 Big Chap figures, I'm sure you're familiar with what I have deemed to be the best Big Chap figure ever produced. But what of Kotobukiya'S other two offerings? Are the Warrior and Runner as true to their film counterparts as Kotobukiya'S first offering? Or are they glorified NECA figures with less posability? I will say that the first thing that sort of irks me about these boxes is that they are all different sizes. I don't see any reason why they couldn't have gone with uniform packaging, but it's not a deal breaker, just an oddity. Since we've already looked at the Big Chap, let's start with the Alien Warrior from James Cameron's Aliens. Inside, you have the figure sandwiched between two plastic trays, with its head and back tubes packaged separately. Immediately, I can see something that might be construed as an inaccuracy, or maybe not, depending on who you talk to. The forearm blades are missing, and it doesn't have the curling lips. The interesting thing about this is that there has been debate in the Alien community as to whether there are two separate types of Alien Warrior in Cameron's film, i.e., one that has the curling lips and forearm blades, and the other that has a more skeletal mouth with no external lips. And a few of the props and costumes were seen without the forearm blades, and there are a few shots of the alien in the film without the lips. So in the end, I don't think that these differences were on purpose, but rather necessitated by FX department limitations in the more action-oriented sequences. That being said, this figure is definitely modeled after specific production stills, as well as the popular Alien door poster, which can still be found in comic book stores and Amazon to this day. This figure is a strange amalgamation between a statue and a proper action figure, in that the tail is bendy and the arms and mouth are articulated, and even the rear tubes are somewhat posable, so unlike its predecessor, this one isn't 100% static, and it is made of a somewhat softer material than the Big Chap, making it feel less like a statue in hand. But all things considered, the details are crisp, and the paint applications are well applied, and the resemblance to the film version is better than passing, but not quite as good as Hot Toys' newest offering. The other accessories are exactly the same for all three figures, which is 6 linking pieces made to look like metal floor grating, and little plastic connective pieces that allow you to build the diorama box. Both the Alien Warrior and the Dog Alien come with one extra thing, which is magnetic pegs that allow the figures to stay in place even when mounted vertically or upside down. The other offering that comes with all three is a mini mood light. As you can see, once everything's built, the Alien Warrior sticks to the wall with a fairly strong magnet, which seems like a gimmick at first, but actually gives some fairly unique display options. And you also have multiple build options with the display base itself. The size of the figure is somewhere between Haya and NECA, completely in scale with the other two figures. I do think that taking a chance and committing to such a dynamic pose paid off in the end, as this figure is unique amongst its many other counterparts. My only major issue is that there are 2 large seams on the feet, and putting the maker's mark on the bottom of a heel that's going to be exposed in most display options was not terribly bright. Next, we have the Dog Alien from Alien 3. The packaging here is inexplicably larger than the other two, but it's a slick design with a color palette that's very reminiscent of the film. It's obvious that Kotobukiya not only understood the creature design, but also the entire aesthetic of the 3 films. Inside, we have the same clamshell style packaging holding the figure and accessories in place. The figure itself is about the same weight and size as the Alien Warrior, but with a more extreme crouching pose. The only assembly for this one is the head. And of course, also in the package we have the box full of base plates and assembly pieces. Though only the arms and tail are posable, this figure feels a lot like the NECA version of the Dog Alien. The paint scheme is good, but not as impressive as the Big Chap, or even the Alien Warrior. Some of the details are hyper sharp, like the teeth and inner mouth, but other details such as the toes are extremely soft. It feels somewhat more like a large Gashpon figure than a scaled-down statue. Not terrible, but I definitely wouldn't pay more than $100 for it. Between the two, I think NECA is the winner, but this one does definitely beat McFarlane's entry. Strangely enough, they went with a soft rubber midsection that isn't really posable, and I certainly hope that that piece doesn't have issues with sagging or decay over the life of the figure. As for the display base, the assembly is the same as the other two, and I have sped up the assembly here so that you can see the whole thing put together without wasting 5 minutes of your life. It's simple, and the pieces are rigid, but there is some finessing that needs to happen in order to get all of the corners lined up properly. It also should be noted that the design is completely modular, so there are several different ways you could put it together. I myself had a very specific way I wanted to display them, so I built them the same but with the Alien Warrior slats running vertically rather than horizontally. As you saw before, with the Alien Warrior, each figure comes with its own individual little box light. Red for the dog alien, blue for the Alien Warrior, and white for the Big Chap. This thing basically runs on button batteries and can't be left on for any length of time without going dead. Not to mention, it doesn't put off enough light to illuminate the figures in the dark, and definitely won't affect the lighting scheme in a well-lit room. So it's a nice little extra, but ultimately pointless. I will say that I'm really glad that they went with strong magnets rather than pegs, as the figure sticks to the wall really well and can also be pulled off and put back on easily. This is actually a gimmick that I would like to see with more figures. As for the trio, well, the Big Chap is so well done that it makes the other two perfectly serviceable figures look like toys in comparison. And of course, missing here is any representation of the alien resurrection creature. It goes without saying that if you are only going to buy one, you should hunt down the Big Chap, but the other two are nice figures, if not somewhat overpriced for what they are. In every respect, from the paint scheme to the micro details, the Big Chap is the best statue you can get for under $300. Yes, there are better statues out there hovering around the price of a used car, the Prime 1 Studio's new 1/3 scale limited edition version being almost an upscaled mirror opposite of this one, but at least Kotobukiya will allow you to eat and pay rent while admiring your perfect organism. I've waxed poetic about this figure before, but it does bear repeating. From the faithfully reproduced folds in the costume, to the complex patterning in the paint scheme, all the way to the slightly inward-turned knees of the giant yet graceful stance of Veloci Bideo, it's hard to believe that this thing was ever on Amazon's deep discount page for $50. From the Kenner Alien on, many Aliens collectibles have always been slightly off of the arc of the collectors community's radar, often being released to little fanfare, only to find themselves being at the top of many collectors' grail lists at the exact moment that they become difficult to find. And in this respect, Kotobukiya has definitely carved out a name for themselves among the better collectible companies. But the Alien Warrior here didn't quite have the same amount of love poured into it as the Big Chap. The paint applications here are a little sloppy, there are a few visible seams as I mentioned, and it's not quite as accurate as it could be, but it's still a strong figure. And I would really love to see the company produce a queen in the same scale and detail. Kotobukiya did produce one more ARTFX alien figure, which is the AVP Grid Alien. The pose is interesting, but the figure is not at all in scale with these, and the detail is lacking to say the least. But when it comes to the other two, they feel a little more reflective of their base price, if not a little overpriced. And never mind the eBay markup, but I have seen them go for between $79 and $100 shipped, which is fair, especially if you're trying to complete the set. But if you're looking for the best out there, start saving up for the 1/6 scale Warrior and Dog Alien from Hot Toys. And because Kotobukiya decided to go with such an exaggerated pose, your display options are somewhat limited. But on the other hand, the magnets give you the leeway to do things with the figures that aren't as readily done with more posable options. As you know, I've explored how the Big Chap stacks up against other figures in his category, but how do Kotobukiya's other two offerings compare to the many figures on the market? I think the easiest way to illustrate this is with the Dog Alien, as the static pose can generally be duplicated with figures released from other companies. From the smallest 1/18 scale Haya figure to the very large 7-inch NECA offering, the Kotobukiya sits squarely in the middle, not quite as large as McFarlane's, but far more movie accurate, and the Kotobukiya is almost identical in size and proportion to NECA's Fireteam Elite Runner Alien. But between these two, the Kotobukiya is definitely the one to get. However, other than the paint job, I think NECA's Ultimate Alien 3 figure is all around a better deal, and this is generally true of the Alien Warrior as well. But there is no way to get any of the other Aliens figures into that crouching pose. On that figure in particular, they do get points for uniqueness. And how did I decide to display these? Well, I went with a sort of yin-yang look, having the Alien Warrior crawling on the ceiling like when they breached the medical lab, and the Dog Alien crouching on the floor much the way the puppet looked chasing the prisoners through the giant furnace. But really what they are both doing is just flanking the main event and drawing attention to what still remains one of the best Alien figures ever produced. Now for a quick tour of my new office space, starting with RoboCop, largely because I will be looking at Good Smile Company's Kane and diecast RoboCop next. My first time seeing RoboCop being my 11th birthday, a Jolt Cola-fueled Entertech squirt gun battling frenzy of childhood mayhem, culminating in an Alf birthday cake. But the pinnacle was that 5 strict parents, including my own, allowed us all to watch Paul Verhoeven's ultra-violent masterpiece, sending many children home to tell their parents exactly what they would buy for $1. This movie was not just something you saw, but something you survived. We may have gone in boys, but we came out grizzled men, wise to the corporate overlords who undoubtedly played with our lives behind the scenes. The world of cinema now offering more than just bright colors and happy endings. And yes, that is an authentic Peter Weller signature. Below RoboCop, I have many of my Trick or Treat Studios masks and collectibles, some of which I will be overhauling as we get closer to Halloween. On a side note, I have 2 Dr. Decker masks, one I've never worn, and the other that I cover in fake blood, sweat, and tears. Not always my own. And even further down, we have something for the future, the entire TB League Egyptian Pantheon. I have been collecting these for many years, but have never opened a single one. And here, for the first time, I will let you all know that I have also been working on a novel for many years. It is a book about the Egyptian gods and their introduction to other gods and demons at the fall of Egypt, and I am now finishing the second draft of the final chapter. But before I start shopping the book, much like I did with the Court of the Dead figures, I will be reading passages from the first chapter as a Story Minute part of my look at these TB League figures. But more on that soon. My 1/4 Mando and Wonder Woman. The 1/4 scale Wonder Woman statue is one of my favorites ever produced, partially because the portrait actually looks quite a bit like my wife. And I also have several Batman figures as well as Superman and other Hot Toys superheroes and villains that are being rotated into the review circuit before I put them up. Here we have my workspace, my computer, and yes, I build my own PCs. And no, I have never bought one off the shelf. It's actually one of my favorite parts about owning a computer. And of course here we have all of the Court of the Dead figures I have been reviewing over the last year. But what's behind the forbidden pumpkin door? Why, my homemade recording booth. As you can see, I decided to pump the money into the recording equipment rather than expensive soundproofing panels, opting for the far uglier but equally functional $20 foam mattress toppers and a staple gun. And lastly, my shelf of upcoming review items. There are many other collectibles in this office and throughout my home, which I will explore with you all in future episodes. But for now, I hope you enjoyed this quick tour of my workspace, and if you're new here, please take a moment to hit all of the applicable buttons. And remember, never stop collecting.